Welcome. My name is Erin Doolittle, and I'm a gardener at Tower Hill Botanic Garden. I'm going to be explaining to you how to create a cut flower bed. For 3 years, in a suburban lot outside of Boston, I grew flowers for a CSA and created bouquets from them. Your first question when you consider planting a cut flower bed might be, why should I when I can just buy flowers? It takes work and some money, but growing your own cut flower garden is fun and deeply rewarding, like all gardening. And if you're a regular purchaser of bouquets from florists or the grocery store, you'll be spared that expense for the growing season. There are other reasons to grow your own. You can grow what you love. Your flowers are fresher and more beautiful than what you can buy. You can wallow in an amazing abundance of fresh flowers, and you can lower your carbon footprint because most flowers that you get from the florist and from grocery stores are flown in from distant places. Good cut flowers are distinguished by certain characteristics. There are exceptions, and you should experiment, but especially in the beginning, it's a good idea to stick with what works. Typically, they have long, strong stems. They have a good vase life, at least 5 days. They add something: color, shape, fragrance, a quality like whimsy or elegance. They are free of strong or bad odors, and they don't shed pollen or petals overly. They are tidy. You can incorporate cut flowers into your perennial beds, or you can create a bed exclusively for them. I'm going to discuss creating a separate bed. Including cuts in a perennial bed is simply that: integrating annuals that are good for cutting into your perennial borders. The benefit of a separate bed is that you don't feel guilty cutting the flowers, and you don't have to worry about the aesthetics when you design, unless you want to. But don't worry, a cut flower bed is a riot of gorgeousness. You also have a choice between perennials or annuals. You can do both, but I would consider keeping them separate if you do. Annuals are season long, basically from July through October. Annual beds can be changed up every year. Annuals are generally brighter and bolder. Perennials are subtler in their beauty, and perennials will last for several or many years. The creation of a cut flower bed is similar to that of any other garden bed. In the case of a cut flower bed, though, you really want more than 6 hours sun a day, and you want to avoid a very windy site because flowers for cutting are generally more than 2 feet tall. Otherwise, make sure you choose a site that has good drainage and can be easily watered. Cut flower gardens, because they are more densely planted, and at least if it's an annual garden, single season, need to be kept well watered. This is the site that I used. It is a strip of my neighbor's yard, actually, that ran alongside our driveway. It had more sun than I could get within my own yard, and it had easy access to water. The spigot was right across from the driveway. The bed was 4 feet wide by about 60 feet long, and I had 1,000 plants in there. All my neighbor asked was that I returned it to grass after I was finished, which I did. Consider getting a soil test. You can find instructions for that on the website of UMass Extension. They do the testing. If your soil is average, you can merely add an inch or two of compost and dig it in. If your soil is nutritionally depleted, add several inches. The easiest way to do that is to do it in the fall prior, where you just lay that compost down, and then in the next spring, When you plant, that's enough turning it in. You don't need to dig it in, essentially. If you're doing it in the spring, go ahead and turn that in and mix it with the soil that's already there. You may need to correct the pH. It's unlikely, but if you do, consult with your local garden center, and they can tell you how and what you need to do. This is New England, so you are likely to encounter a lot of rocks as you dig. Maybe you can build a stone wall at the same time and kill two birds with one stone. Turn the soil to about 1 foot depth, essentially the depth of a shovel or fork. It can be laborious the first time you dig this bed. If it was grass, you will need to remove that layer first. You don't want to mix it in. The easiest way I found to dig grass is to shave it off with a flat shovel just below the roots. When it comes to laying out the bed, you want to maximize sun exposure and your ease of access. A cut flower bed is densely planted, so it's important to be able to reach in there and get weeds and cut. You want to plant a rectangle that's no more than 4 feet wide. You want your tallest plants to the back, in other words, the northern edge, so that the taller plants don't block sun for the shorter plants. You could consider short paths across the bed or stepping stones within the bed to make it easier for you to get in there and do what you need to do. Here's an example of a simple layout for a cut flower bed. It's got the taller plants, the sunflowers, to the northern edge. It's along an east-west axis to maximize sun exposure, and it's about 4 feet wide. A simple tool to help you design is to create a scale in your drawing where, say, 1/4 inch equals a foot or 1/2 inch equals a foot. And that is represented by the grid that I have in this drawing and in the prior drawing. That allows you to determine how many plants per foot you're going to need. You have options when planting. You'll get a much better selection of flowers through seed catalogs. Or you can purchase plants, or you can do a combination. When it comes to purchasing plants, there are pros and cons. First and foremost, it's easy. The plants are further along. You have less selection if you purchase your plants, but you could still create a beautiful and productive cut flower bed. The quality isn't always as good, especially from the big box stores. Seeds are more eco-friendly unless you're buying from a local nursery, CSA, or farmer's market. If you grow from seeds, some seeds should be started indoors and some directly into the ground. You can find resources online and through seed companies and nurseries on how to grow seeds. You may be able to find a farmer or a friend who can grow them for you. You will have to pay, but it will be less money than buying full-grown plants. If you direct sow, some seeds are better sown before frost and some after. You want to follow the directions on the seed packet. Don't forget to label your rows. Don't forget to thin. You're going to sow them at a thicker rate than the final rate because the germination might not be perfect, and then you thin them out to the separation that they are supposed to be. And that is all on the packet in the directions. You want to maintain even moisture through the germination period, which can be from 2 days to 2 weeks. Basically, you don't want the ground to dry out, but you don't really need to soak it either. Here's a list of flowers that are best direct sown. I would investigate all these flowers and see what you like and choose the ones that you like. They're all good cut flowers. Pincushion flower is not Nigella species, it is scabiosa. If you are able to find someone to grow your seed for you and you can purchase seedlings from them, the benefit of that is that you can still grow what you want and you can decide. You can purchase the seeds and they can grow them for you. Typically they will have been hardened off, but you need to find out. If you need to harden them off yourself, that's a process of acclimating them to the outdoor environment, and they're going to need to go out for a few hours every day in the beginning, and then over the course of a week you leave them outside more and more, and then you bring them back inside overnight, and eventually you leave them outside completely, and then you can plant them. When it comes to maintaining your garden, your primary considerations are going to be keeping it weeded and keeping it watered. Keeping your garden well weeded, especially when your plants are young, is important so that they don't have to compete for nutrients. Your garden will likely need to be watered every day. You can lay down a simple system of soaker hoses, or you can do it by hand yourself. Spend a good amount of time doing this. Give it a good soak. You should be able to feel moisture an inch below the surface with your finger. One condition you've probably seen is powdery mildew. This is what it looks like. It's very common, and it is not a comment on your skills as a gardener. The good news is that it only affects the leaves, not the flowers. The treatment for powdery mildew must be preventative. You can find homemade remedies online, and as soon as you see it, you want to apply it to all the other plants that could be affected by it. It typically affects cosmos, zinnias, monarda, and phlox, as well as peonies. It can be recognized by the white fuzz on both sides of the leaves, and it thrives in warm, dry weather. The good news is you can still strip the leaves and use the flowers in your bouquets. Start at the end when it comes to choosing what to grow. What kind of bouquets do you envision? Many small bouquets or a big booming bouquet for an entrance hall? What colors do you love? What shapes? What feel? Do you prefer big, bold flowers like dahlias or flowers with a wildflower look like cosmos? Let the answers dictate your flower choices. This is a list of tried and true annuals for a cut flower bed. They all come in different colors and varieties with shape and size and so forth. You really can't go wrong if you choose this group of flowers. This slide shows a collection of different cosmos and zinnias, which are two annuals that do not ship well, so they're better grown at home locally. They're great choices for your cut flower bed. Two other flowers that provide great variety and color are celosia and gomphrena. They come in different colors and different shapes. The gomphrena is basically the ball shape and very bright colors. The celosia has 3 different types of flower heads, and they're wonderful cut flowers as well and very productive. This list of perennial stalwarts will give you bloom from late spring through the fall. This slide shows some perennials that will cover the season for you. You've got columbine in the lower middle row, and that is an early spring bloom. The roses are late spring, the aster is late fall, yarrow is fall, and phlox on the lower right-hand corner is a midsummer bloom. Herbs can be beautiful in bouquets. They offer texture and fragrance, and sometimes flowers. Fennel, lovage, and dill are examples of herbs that make great filler with their lacy texture. Allium flower heads come in many shapes and sizes. You can extend your cut flower season earlier by using tulips and daffodils that you plant the prior fall. Tulips and daffodils come in early, mid, and late. That would be late March, April, and May. Generally speaking, the larger the tulip or daffodil, the later it is. You can consider fragrance, and I would consider unusual varieties and just experiment and have fun with it. When it comes to planting them in a production bed like this, they can almost touch when they're planted. You want to plant them deeply, especially the daffodils, so that they're not damaged by the digging if you're intending to leave them. I would plant the tulips and daffodils separately because the tulips should be dug up, and you should plant fresh tulips every year because they diminish over the years. They don't look as good from year to year. Here are just a few examples of tulips and daffodils in their variety and color and shape. You may decide you want to create dried flower bouquets. You can grow specifically for that, or at the end of the season, when you're ready to shut your garden down, you'll still have some flowers, and you may choose to dry those flowers. So I'll give you some pointers for doing that. Here's a selection of flowers that are good for dried bouquets. These are also flowers that are great in non-dry bouquets, regular cutting flowers. You could start with using them in your bouquets, your regular bouquets, and then save some for drying as well. I'm not an expert on drying flowers, so I'm just giving you some general tips. If you want more information, you can Google it. There are some special procedures for drying flowers beyond just hanging them upside down. You can also look in the library for books. In general, though, you want to pick in the late morning after the dew has dried, but before the heat picks up. Moisture will cause mold. That is also why you want to hang them upside down in a dark and dry area. New England basements are generally too wet and damp. You're better off with the attic. You want to pick them when they're perfect. With regular bouquets, you sometimes want to pick them a little earlier than that, but with dried flowers, if you're planning to dry them, you want to pick them when they're in full bloom and not past. You want to remove the foliage, gather them into bunches, and fasten that with a rubber band, and then hang them upside down. Okay, in terms of harvesting your flowers, there's some general guidelines to follow. You want to cut when the temperature is below 80 degrees if it's possible. You want to cut an 18-inch stem to give yourself flexibility. And when you do that, you may have more blooms on that stem than you want, or some blooms might be past, and then some are perfect, and then some are early. Just clean up the stem to make it what you want to be. Take off the old blooms and anything that's crowding your arrangement. You want to put them directly into lukewarm water. You want to keep them out of direct sunlight, and try to avoid cutting when the plants are wet. If that's not possible, Dry them with a gentle fan, and don't put them into a cooler if you have a cooler. Don't put them in damp. Your refrigerator is not the right temperature, so don't refrigerate your flowers. When you go to create your bouquets, always use a clean vase and clean water. Remove any leaves that will be in the water. They create bacteria. In designing, hold your flowers in one hand and add to the bouquet with the other hand. You want to hold it and don't think about the lengths of the stems as you're creating the bouquet. And then once you've got your bouquet, how you like it, then go and with your scissors angled, cut the stems to an even length at an angle so that they can better absorb the water. And you want to change the water and recut the stems every few days. Use sharp pruners or scissors if those will be enough. The next few slides are going to have some bouquets that I created for the CSA, and I just thought it would be nice to give you an example showing you the different flowers that I used. This one has cosmos, zinnia, amaranthus. That Y is incorrect, ignore the Y. Daucus, ageratum, and salvia. These bouquets contain annual rudbeckia, the little sort of miniature brown-eyed Susans. That's Rudbeckia triloba. It's very prolific, and it will also self-seed. They also contain amaranthus, zinnia, globe amaranth, which is gomphrena, the bright purple dots there, marigold, ageratum, salvia, artemisia, which is a textural element, gray silver, and dahlias. I've used ferns to edge this bouquet. Not all ferns like this. They'll, curl up and wilt, but some will accept it, and you just have to experiment with that. I've also done the same thing with hosta leaves, which actually make a very good cut leaf. The other plants in this particular bouquet are cosmos. I see nigella, the frilly blue flower, and then the little more dot-like blue flower is an ageratum. There's zinnias in there, there's gomphrena, and there's cleome, which is also known as spider flower. These bouquets contain much the same flowers. They've got cosmos, the bright orange. They've got ageratum, the light blue. The other blue flower, the darker, more star-shaped one, is nigella. And it's also got cleome. And on the right-hand side is cosmos and a flower called Irish poet, tassel flower, which is the orange. And then it's got zinnias. If you look at the zinnias, you see the leaves are slightly curled over. That's the correct time to cut zinnias, a little before they're fully open, and then they open in the vase. The larger sort of blousy white flower on the lower right-hand side of the bouquet is a hydrangea, a limelight hydrangea. They make wonderful cut flowers also. Here are more examples of the bouquets that I made for the CSA. They contain the flowers that I've already mentioned, and the large yellow flowers that look like brown-eyed Susans kind of are rudbeckias also, annual rudbeckia. When it comes to design, I would encourage you to be creative and expressive. Just try different things, do what you want. There are some design basics that can help you have success. One of them is grouping things together. So taking a like flower, like a rose or any flower, and making a little group of it and next to another little group of a different flower. And then I would encourage you to vary your textures and your shapes within that, so that you maybe have something sticking up and something that's kind of all fuzzy, and something more sort of solid and defined next to that. There is a concept called thriller, filler, and spiller that's used in arrangements, and it's also used in the arrangement of containers. And it's very successful. So that would be a flower that's, sticking up and eye-catching, then something else that's kind of a bulk filler in the middle, and then something else that comes over the side, that acts like an ivy or looks that way, something that will kind of fall down over the sides. But for all of this, the purpose is to have fun, to enjoy yourself, to enjoy the beauty and joy of flowers. So I would just encourage you to use your creativity and do what you want and don't feel constrained. Thanks a lot for listening, and I hope you got something out of it.